So, dear friends, welcome if you're new here, or welcome back if you've been following for a little while. I'm Catherine G. Lucas. And actually, the first thing I want to say before I go any further is you may have noticed, you may be able to tell from my accent that I'm from the UK. But you may also be able to tell from like the amount of sunshine here that I don't live in the UK. So my husband and I moved to Catalonia in Spain about 7 or 8 years ago. So we're a couple of hours south of Barcelona, and we absolutely love it. So that's just to get that out of the way. So I'd like to pick up on where I left off last time with these themes, which, as I mentioned, I'm going to be addressing more and more this year. And in fact, I also mentioned that, last year had been almost like a bit of a fallow year for me. And I think the reason that I'm being called to, to start sharing more videos again and kind of just talking about these themes is because they're really coming to the fore now. I mean, not that they haven't been over the last few years, but this process, this challenging process of spiritual, just emergence and emergency, this kind of awakening at the planetary level, which is not easy, and if anything, it's going to get even more tough. So we need to understand the process so that we can be prepared for it, I think. And so I want to start sharing just some of kind of like my understanding of the relationship between the personal process of awakening and the planetary process of awakening, just to kind of help you not get knocked about so much by it. That's really my primary motivation, is to support all of us as we go through this massive process. So one of the things that can happen at the in terms of this whole kind of awakening is that it can be difficult to distinguish sometimes between what is our inner stuff and what is actually the collective, like out there kind of stuff, for want of a better word. So and this is tricky. It's not easy to distinguish always between like the personal and the planetary. And Jung coined this term, the collective unconscious. And in fact, even Jung, who kind of came up with this concept, even he got confused. So for example, I think it was must have been about 1912 or so. I'm a bit vague on the dates, on the specifics, but he started having visions of kind of like rivers of blood. And he was kind of freaking out. As a psychiatrist, he thought that this basically meant that he was heading for kind of major kind of psychotic breakdown or something. And then, within a year or two, the First World War had broken out, and there were indeed, sadly, tragically, rivers of blood. Just horrendous bloodshed. And so, then he was able to see at that point, okay, so what he was picking up on, these visions that he was having, they didn't relate to his personal path. They related to the collective and what was happening out there. Now, obviously, we are the collective. All of us individuals make up the collective. So there is there's a relationship between the two. But if we can separate them out, that's going to be really helpful. This is something that comes up quite often in my my spiritual emergence and emergency mentoring group. Just this like, okay, so is this something that is personal material, or is it that actually we're tapping into what's happening at the collective level? And so, for example, if you think back to the pandemic, you know, and the levels of fear that were around then, you know, how much, if you experienced fear, how much of that was your own fear, and how much of it was just what you were picking up that was like out there in the collective. And this is why it's so important to be able to look after ourselves and come back to our inner sense of stillness and like our center, to come back to our center. Because actually, you know, I remember kind of, you know, kind of having a sense and talking to colleagues and friends and other people, you know, those of us who've been through this process of spiritual emergence and emergency, we kind of didn't get so caught up in the collective and the fear of what was happening during the pandemic. We were able to kind of just see the bigger picture and step back a little bit from it. And that's what I really want to be encouraging you to do now, as we go through 2025. The other thing that can happen, and this is maybe a little bit more, maybe not so often, and maybe it's a bit of a more kind of extreme kind of response. Extreme's not even the right word, actually. But one of the things that can happen when we're going through the process, you know, our own process of awakening that speeds up and becomes unmanageable and tips over into crisis, what can happen is that we end up fearing that we're going to physically die. And it's because we are so kind of identified with our ego, so attached to the ego, that we kind of confuse an ego death with our physical death. And so I think, you know, let's also watch out for this potentially happening. You know, as we go through 2025, well, and you know, the next few years, really. You know, are there times when actually, because the collective is going through something of an ego death, but obviously the collective is very attached, you know, very identified with the ego. You know, just look for times of your own sense of mortality. Now, obviously, you know, again, these are tricky things to work through, and they're sensitive issues, really, because if you think about it, you know, where we have a climate crisis, you know, we've had severe flooding near me. In fact, you know, the horrendous flooding in Valencia, where a lot of people lost their lives, you know, it's only a couple of hours south from me. So there may well, you know, there may be times when actually fear for our own physical well-being and our own physical mortality is very real. But at the same time, you know, just be aware that there is this whole other piece about an ego death. You know, as we go through the awakening, we're kind of becoming less and less identified with our egos. So we can have a sense of part of us, you know, maybe just a part of our old self falling away. So yeah, so I think hopefully those are kind of helpful things to be aware of. These, you know, this is where we can learn so much from the personal process of spiritual emergence and emergency, and how we can apply it to the collective process, and kind of, yeah, just help us, you know, help us to cope with this this huge upheaval that we're going through. And something else, I'm just wondering, I've just had a kind of momentary kind of blank. I'm wondering whether it's going to come back. There was something else I wanted to share about that. Yes, I've remembered what it was. Thanks for bearing with me. If you haven't, you know, if the relationship in my work, the link, if you like, between what I do around birth and new earth and my work around spiritual emergence and emergency, you know, it may be that link hasn't really been very clear, that relationship, because, you know, there's up until relatively recently, my work around spiritual emergency has been very much at the personal level, whereas obviously Birth the New Earth is very much about the planetary. Well, I think now you're going to be able to start seeing more and more the relationship between the two, and and I feel this is crucial. You know, I feel that this kind of perspective and understanding is absolutely vital. That unless we have a good handle on the process at the personal level, we're going to get really thrown and knocked about by the planetary level. It's just not going to make sense. Whereas this is a way of making sense of it. So I'm going to leave you with that, and yeah, I look forward to our next encounter. Bye for now.